Good morning from the hotel here in Minneapolis. About to head out to the airport, but I just finished watching the tape of 49ers Vikings. And first things first, Brock Purdy played well. I'm going to get into that a little bit later today. He was very accurate, and the circumstances were not favorable. Not a lot of separation from the 49ers receivers, and the pass protection wasn't great either. Trent Williams gave up 4 pressures. It's the most pressure that Trent Williams has given up as a 49er when he's been healthy. I know they had the high ankle sprain in the NFC Championship game. I think he gave up 5 that 2021 season against the Rams. But Purdy, we'll talk about that later. The biggest issue that the 49ers have to address coming out of this game is actually on the defensive side of the ball. And it's their coverage alignments. There were 2 extremely damaging plays by Justin Jefferson, on which the 49ers guarded the top receiver in football without a cornerback. The 97-yard touchdown I talked about a lot yesterday. That was George Odom, a safety, lined up on Jefferson in the slot. Jair Brown had the help over the top. Jair Brown misread what Jefferson was going to do, so Jefferson just blew the roof off both of them. Odom and Jair Brown then looked really bad chasing Justin Jefferson into the end zone. Naked eye, when I was watching in real time, I thought the 49ers had rectified the issue. I thought that there'd be no way there'd be another snap with no cornerback on Justin Jefferson. But late in the first half, 3rd and long, one of the many 3rd and longs that the Vikings converted in this game, we saw the 49ers again put a non-corner on Jefferson. It was Fred Warner off the line of scrimmage, a linebacker. I don't care how great Fred Warner is. I'm the one that's calling him a future Hall of Famer. You can't have him on the top receiver in the game with Malik Mustafa as safety help. And Sam Darnold completed to Jefferson for the first down. That led to a field goal. Those were 3 points the 49ers certainly would not have liked the Vikings to have when you looked at how this game ended. So the 49ers defensively, corner is their strong suit now. They've got a lot of talent at that position. They need to make sure that they lean into it. And I think this was only the second game for defensive coordinator Nick Sorensen. He's new at this job. It took D'Amico Ryans a half season to really work into the defensive coordinator role. So I would be confident, just watching this team from the outside, that San Francisco would make the adjustments to lean more into the cornerback room, especially when they're facing elite wide receivers. It was just last year that Kyle Shanahan made sure that Charvarius Ward would follow DK Metcalf around before that Thanksgiving night game against the Seahawks. But when we look at the crux of the 49ers issues yesterday was on the defensive side of the ball, where they just could not get 3rd down stops. It was 7 of 12 for the Vikings on 3rd down, and most of those 7 were 3rd and long conversions. And coverage alignment was the biggest issue for San Francisco. They need to make sure that they've got the right coverages on the back end. And the 2 most glaring examples of stuff not being aligned correctly were when they tried to cover Justin Jefferson without a cornerback. You have to lean into the cornerback talent because safeties and linebackers are not as fast as corners, and they're not as well equipped to go against A-list receivers. Offensive side of the ball, I'll talk about Purdy and the accuracy in a separate video. I wanted to get you guys primed for that, so be ready for that a little bit later today. Protection-wise, though, it was really interesting. Everybody talks about how often Minnesota blitzes, and yes, they blitz very often. This is an aggressive defense. We even saw some video of Brock Purdy after the game complimenting the coordinator, Brian Flores. It's a nice scheme, man, when they're shaking hands on the field after the game. That's all great, but when I watched this tape, what struck me is that Minnesota registered a couple really key victories yesterday with a 4-man rush without blitzing. And I know Brian Flores creates a lot of confusion at the line of scrimmage. Sometimes he'll show blitz and they'll drop back, and maybe that led to some of the 49ers losses against the 4-man front. But you got to start with the basics. The front 4 cannot get pressure as if they're blitzing against the quarterback, because when we talk about separation issues, well, it's going to be hard to generate separation even if Christian McCaffrey's out on the field, even if Brandon Ayuk is 100%. if there are 7 or even 8 back in coverage. So when the defense is not blitzing, you got to pick up the rush. And especially Colton McKivitz, I think, struggled early on against one of the 4-man rushes from the Vikings on a 3rd and 5 that set the 49ers back. But big picture here is that the 49ers scored 32 against a good Jets defense, really good coverage unit. And they're a play away from being at 24 yesterday against the defensive coordinator in Brian Flores and a defense that has given them fits. Remember, Flores in 2020 stymied the 49ers when he was with the Dolphins. Then last year with the Vikings, held them to 17. Yesterday, held them to 17. 49ers had that 4th and goal. Nice blitz from Flores. That kept them at 17. Instead, they convert that play. They're at 24 with a lot of meat left on the bone. I mean, we're talking Brandon Ayuk doesn't look like he's in form yet. Obviously, no Christian McCaffrey on the field yet. I think Trent Williams and that offensive line, they haven't gelled yet. Passing yardage league-wide is way down. Passing touchdowns are way down through 2 games. Teams are only averaging 190 passing yards per game. So that tells me that defenses, as they normally are just naturally ahead of offenses, especially these defenses that have complex blitzes, because the offenses are struggling to pick up the pressure. So the 49ers have a ton of meat left on the bone. They still have this whole evolution into the season to experience, to get into, and they still almost were a play away from that 24-point output against Minnesota. 32 against the Jets. That just shows you that in the big picture, the 49ers are on track to be just fine. But they do have to start with the basics, and that is effectively combating 4-man rushes. They did a lot better job against the New York Jets, but you know what? They also struggled early against the Jets when they were in pass-heavy mode because it was a pass rush game. Then they, changed the fulcrum of that game to the run offense, and they were able to bowl over the Jets. It wasn't as, and that set up Purdy off play action, and it set everything else up and put the Jets on their heels. It was not as easy against the Minnesota Vikings because Flores comes out trying to take away the run game. That's why you saw 5 straight Purdy passes to start. It wasn't about Kyle Shanahan throwing too much or running too much. I mean, those are all, let's be honest, those are all kind of dumb fan analysis takes after some of these games. You don't know where they should have thrown or where they should have run. That's all determined by much more complex things than you could see on the TV copy. But what the 49ers did need to do in this football game against the Minnesota Vikings is protect better in standard situations and execute better in standard situations to make all their play calls come together. They had Purdy go for over 300 yards and they had Mason run for 100 yards. I think the run-pass balance was fine in that regard. But they only completed 2 of 10 third downs in this game, so they lost at some of the critical junctures. The potential to produce is there. We saw it through the raw yardage, but it hasn't been fully realized yet. And we saw that on the scoreboard where they only managed 17 points. But it's a work in progress. So those are the things the 49ers have to fix. That's my first quick initial look here before I rush off to the airport in Minneapolis. Knock on wood, still have not missed a flight in my life. I don't think today is going to be number 1 either. We'll talk to you guys really soon. We'll delve into that Purdy accuracy. There's a staggering statistic that showed just how good and accurate he was in this game. I think a lot of people have the wrong read on this. I get it. There's a whole lot of other factors on the football field, but you can't always try to shovel blame at the quarterback. That is often not going to be correct, especially in this situation.